because Rodney Moody was a dangerous person. And this is the fine line when people die. You don't speak ill of the dead. There's lots of grieving people who knew this man and other people who died. At the same time, there are victims.
The complicated world of homelessness and journalism in New Hampshire has once again reared its head with the death of Rodney Moody. I'm going to dive into it now.
The New England Take.
Excited to be joined by Concord Patch's Tony Schinella. Thank you for joining me.
Hey, good to see you again. Thanks for having me on again.
Yeah, totally. Concord story. You've been reporting in the city for a very long time. You run the Concord Patch, which is honestly, it's one of the best places to get local news here in this town. And the homelessness situation obviously has been a rampant issue, escalated over the last 10, 20 years. And you could probably talk about that a little bit too. But there was an article in the Concord Monitor titled, "He Went Home Remembering Rodney Moody, the Mayor of Concord's Homeless Community." And it is a very romantic look at homelessness, and it really seems to gloss over a lot of the kind of the terrible situation these people live in on one side, and on the other side too, the very complicated nature of many of these homeless individuals that have chronic homelessness, I guess maybe a way to phrase it, where it's the people that have been out there for years and years and years. They're not necessarily looking to get out of the situation, or they have such a terrible situation they're not able to get out of it directly, as we'll talk about specifically with Moody. I was really frustrated by the article, but I'm curious what your take is on it.
Yeah, no, it's a very fine line. There's so many facets to the story. I was invited to, I was out of town at the time, so I couldn't make a commitment to it, but I did have one of the activist types invite me to this event, which Rodney Moody was passed away months ago, and they were going to honor him at Centerpoint Church and then have a march to the Homeless Resource Center. I was, you and I were talking offline about, I was at the National Association of Broadcasters convention and on a professional development vacation, and could not attend. And I don't necessarily know if I would have attended either. I have gone to the memorial vigils in the past that honors those who have lost their lives in our state, who are homeless or unhoused or whatever you want to call it. I call it homeless. I've been homeless before, so I understand a lot of the facets of not as once as an adult for a short period of time and twice as a child, due to divorce and spending. This was on my father's side. I didn't always consider it homelessness until my second mom, my dad's second wife, who had 7 other children with my father. I was lecturing my children about how lucky we were not to be homeless, and she said to me, "Well, you were homeless." And I said, "No, I couch surfed for a few weeks when I was on my own at 17 in New York, and I would consider that kind of homeless, but it wasn't by choice, or by necessity." And she was like, "Well, don't you remember those summers where we were in Maryland living in the back of the van?" And I said, "Well, we were camping." And she said, "We just made it look that way." And she likened it to the Chris Farley bit in SNL, where he goes crazy. He's the inspirational speaker, and he goes like, "You're not living in the van down by the river," right? You can see that bit on YouTube, and that was 2 summers of my life as a teenager, living with my father, who did odd jobs and was a stoner at the time, and didn't want to live, and lived on boats, had a very eclectic lifestyle, much to the detriment and joy of both negative and positive of his children. And he recently passed away about 14 months ago, so I've kind of been dealing with a lot of those things. And he had Alzheimer's. It was a long goodbye. It was over 5 years, and it was just I went down to see him every couple of months to spend a long weekend with him. Anyway, my rambling point is I've not only just with Pash, but also with personal experience and knowing a lot of these people. I couldn't go to the event. And then when I saw the story, and I'll be honest, I don't read the Concord Monitor a lot. They have their thing, I have mine. I don't tell people don't read them like some people do. Don't read the patch. Tony just cares about clicks. Yep, I only care about clicks because that's how I make my money. I gather up pennies. That's how I make a living. It is about the clicks. I don't have your $300 a year to pay for a print edition. I don't have a print edition. It is all about the clicks. But I tell you the truth too. I make mistakes just like everybody else, but everything you read on the patch is accurate at that moment. It may change later, but I don't not tell people things. And so I didn't go to the event. I was a little surprised by the story because Rodney Moody was a dangerous person. And this is the fine line when people die. You don't speak ill of the dead. None of us are perfect. And we shouldn't. There's lots of grieving people who knew this man and other people who died. At the same time, there are victims of Rodney Moody. He was a child sexual assaulter, and not that long ago, like not 50 years ago, or the dozens of arrests that your viewers can see now. I'll have them down by the end of April. Because every time someone who's homeless or has arrests that they didn't take care of that dies, I take them off my site, with the exception of a handful who have been accused or found to have been guilty of murder or drug dealing, death resulting, or anything heinous. You have a right to know that that person killed the other person with a rock, and which happened to another homeless person. And the family has asked me to take the story down, and I go, no. I'm sorry. Well, I don't know how to tell my kids that, their father was, whatever. And I'm like, their father killed someone with a rock. Their father didn't go and steal a candy bar from Mr. Grocer. Okay? I've learned some of these things the hard way, AJ, and I'm gonna just let me say this, and then I'll be quiet, and it's your show. I've had difficulty with this issue. And I have toned my coverage down, not to the point of writing a flowery story about the mayor of the homeless community of our city who was a child sexual assaulter. Oh, and a regular assaulter. Oh, and all kinds of other things, who's been arrested at least more than 24 times, at least dozens of times in the city of Concord in the last 10 years. I would never do that. It's wrong. It's you. Now, I guess the reverse thinking is we can write the flowery story about the child sexual assaulter who was homeless and the mayor of the homeless, because they can go and Google on the patch and find out what he really did. But to not even have a line, we're not supposed to speak ill of the dead. We're not. I know. We're imperfect people. I'll give you two other quick examples of the time I've did that and gotten terrible feedback from the community. There was a member of the New American community who died in a car accident on I-89 North, right in Warner, if I recall. It was maybe 3 or 4 years ago. I had an advocate who later ran for city council. They aren't a fan. Agreed to sit down for an interview. I was like, whoa, okay, well, they really want to win then, because half the city reads my site. So, that's good. That was victory. We don't like each other or don't agree on stuff and whatever. And it's not my job. I don't care about that. My job is to interview you, find out why you're running. And we had off time before the interview. And this person said, here's why people are angry with you. You included a link to an arrest of the person who died in that car accident, who was a member of the New American community. I said, yes, I did. Did you read why the person was arrested repeatedly? Yes, I did. Right. Revocation. They weren't licensed. And yet they were arrested for not driving 2 or 3 times. And then they die in a car accident that they shouldn't have been driving in. And I said, no, you can be upset with me, and my readers can be in the small segment. They yelled at me, about 50 or 60 of them. I can't believe you're posting this person's arrest. I said, that's okay. Yep. But if you stop and think, that person and everybody in that car would still be alive if he was not driving. Why? Because he wasn't licensed to drive. It's the same thing when the felon goes and gets a gun or a knife. They're not supposed to have it. They're a felon. They made a choice. And to go, oh my God, terrible car accident. Yep, terrible car accident. They should have never gotten into a car with an unlicensed person. Period. It's a tragedy. Why is it a tragedy? Not because I linked the person's previous arrests for not for revocation, but because the person was unlicensed and should not be driving. Second story, many moons ago. Young woman freezes to death in the Walmart parking lot in Concord. I do, like I do with a lot of people. Who is she? I start doing research. Oh my goodness, she was arrested repeatedly. And terrible, beautiful young woman, early 20s. Don't know the whole story. Here's what I found out. I always used to do this. Here's what I found out about this person. Repeatedly arrested for all kinds of reasons. Could make the leap why they were alone in the car on a winter's night in the Walmart parking lot. And everybody freaks out because there's a young woman in a car who freezes to death. Horrible tragedy. All hell breaks loose on my site. People yelling at me. Yelling at me on the site, on the Facebook feed. You're a terrible person for talking about all these problems that this woman had. I'm like, no, this is the reality of the footprint she left. I added other things. There were other things in there too. I want to know about the young woman who freezes to death in her early 20s in the Walmart parking lot. What is there that I can find out? She wasn't a Concord resident, or did not know. People knew her. Patch readers knew her. Handful did, but she wasn't from here. She was from Bedford, Manchester, those communities down there. About 3 weeks after, and a couple of people in my company, we discussed it, and it was like, this is what you could find. This is not about being horrific. This is about who is this person. A few weeks later, remember, the family wrote to me and said that she had burned every bridge, everybody who could have lent her a place to stay, or a couch to sleep on, or someplace to go. She had done harm to everybody in her family. And she was at the end. And I didn't feel better about it. I don't do that much anymore. I will do the research, but I won't necessarily tell everything I know, because I personally agree with some of the readers who were upset with the coverage. There's a point to it. The point is to get you to learn. We all learn from everything. All of our mistakes we learn from. I learn from everything I do wrong or make mistakes on. It's not personal. And what I suspected was true. And I found out later from that family member what we had already kind of suspected. And it was awful. And I can't imagine what it would have been like to have been. The family already probably knew it was going to happen someday, having to walk by in the Walmart parking lot and see a dead person in their car, walking by the car and turn around and look and go, I mean, it's a tragedy. And the one person could say, well, you don't have to make it any more tragic. Yep, that's true. That's one way to go. The other way to go is, here's who this person was that we don't know, who was found dead in a car in our community.
And people assume, I get called it all the time. It's like you're just being heartless. You're not thinking. You're not thinking about what the suffering these people go through or things like this. It's like, no, 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 no. I feel tremendous sympathy for pretty much anyone that is in these terrible situations. Like it is not good, but we don't learn how to fix or help people if we just say these people are just victims of this system that I'm looking around looking for where this system is that's necessarily keeping some of these people out. Like, yeah, we have bad issues when it comes to housing placement, things like that. Obviously, it's a very, very complicated issue in this country. But there's a level of, we need to know what's happening, what led to it, because sometimes it is something that these individuals do, or something like going back to Moody here, like in the article, I totally missed that it was even mentioned at all that he had this background at all. Is 2/3 of the way down in the article, in one line, two very short sentences, where she says, this was regarding his housing, but a criminal background complicated his chances. He had been a registered sex offender since 1998. Very passive, very not detailed in any possible way. Like, yeah, because this is an individual that people didn't want to give support because of what went on, and then all the other criminal issues, which I'm sure are not mentioned at all. Like, I did a quick Google search to see, okay, what comes up for this guy, because there had to be more, and there was. There are resources. If someone did something decades ago, eventually probably they can find something. But if they're continuing to show a pattern of being a problem, we can't just baby these individuals that are continuing to make terrible life choices that hurt other people. It's sad, it's unfortunate, but we can't hide from it.
He was convicted of child sexual assault.
Hammer on that. This is a child, was the victim.
We don't know who the child was or is, if they're still around. And we protect victims. So it would be very difficult for a Concord Monitor, or even me, reporter, journalist, to be able to go and talk to the victim. This person did not nick a candy bar at a grocery store. They repeatedly were arrested for duty to report, which is a quarterly thing you need to do with the police department if you're a sex offender, so they know where you're working, they know your vehicle, and they know, so they can instantly find out why there might be a car outside a playground. If you're, and there's lots of advocates on the other side who say we shouldn't be doing that. Sex offender registration doesn't save anybody. Nope, sorry. We've made a conscious decision as a society that people who rape children, sexually assault children, or adults should be able to be tracked a little bit on their social media accounts, on their cell phone numbers, on their vehicles, and their jobs and addresses. And we've made that decision.
And something he didn't do according to the law, like it's written about in the patch. Yeah. Like, he refused to check in and register when he moved and things like that.
Yeah. Now you could say, well, okay, it's very difficult to keep track of your court cases and your quarterly when you're living in a tent by the river or under the bridge or whatever. Yep, that's difficult. He sexually assaulted a child.
We're gonna write about him like he's this unofficial mayor of the homeless community. Like it's atrocious. I can't even, I don't know what's good. I don't.
It's indefensible. It's indefensible.
Yeah.
To have that be one line. Let me give you another example. Your viewers can figure this one out. It was a little while ago. I might be able to kick it up real quick if I search, because I won't remember all of the aspects of it. But there was a guy who was hit by a car on I-393, a homeless sex offender. There was a big row about it because he was this homeless sex offender. His background was discussed, and everybody went crazy about it, like you weren't supposed to discuss it. And one of the interesting things, there was a lot of back and forth on it. It was very heated, very heated exchanges on Facebook, on my Facebook feed, as well as the Concord Monitors. Um, and the victim of that person chimed in and said, I forgave him. And it was like a really powerful um, uh, testimonial by the victim, and said, "Hey, we were on speaking terms. I got over it," kind of a thing. And um, but it was stunning. The I didn't write, he was a homeless sex offender who deserved to get hit by a car and die, right? Like I didn't, that wasn't the, yeah, that I didn't write that or anything. And but there were commenters who said that, and that why are we, and they were raising money, and then there was all these arguments about who's going to shovel the snow on in between North Main Street and Commercial Street to get down to the Friendly Kitchen. That was supposed to be the Friendly Kitchen's agreed to responsibility during the planning. It's technically the state's supposed to do it, and we went through this whole thing about the sidewalk not being cleared and everybody yelling at each other, and wanting to raise money for his funeral and everything else. I mean, it was just chaos. And so we've had these things happen where the press has said the facts of whatever, okay, this man was a victim because he was in a wheelchair that got hit by a car and the snow was not cleared off the sidewalk on state sidewalks. It's technically the entrance of an interstate, but it's also a sidewalk that goes from North Main Street to South Commercial Street so that people can walk around the corner to get to the Friendly Kitchen and get their 3 square meals a day. So, yep, he was a victim of that, but he was also a heinous criminal. And so we've had this happen before. And he didn't get a flowery, and he was a victim. He got hit by a car and was killed, right? So, yes,
Yeah.
Gene Parker, 2016.
Oh yeah.
Yes, homeless man in critical condition after being hit by hit on I-93. And I remember now. I linked all of his previous, right? Right. I did again. It was. I linked the prior stories of his criminal history. And this too, sometimes, and I will plead guilty to this, it is a sledgehammer against a grape. Yep, I do that. Guilty. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's subtle. Here are the links. You want to know who this person really was? I don't have to slap you with a rubber chicken. You can click on it yourself and find out who this person was. He was also a victim. But victimized others before.
Yeah, it's so important. It seems the trend I see, especially with it's not necessarily politically related, but the more left leaning outlets for sure seem to have this bend. You see this with NHPR, you see it with the Monitor, you see it with Seacoast Online and such, where they focus the story specifically on a character, whether it's Moody, whether it's even for something that's totally outside of a controversial take, where it's something happened to a family or education, things like that. It's the story of an individual person as they center on, and they get really not the people get really not happy. Like, you're covering it as a proper journalist that's like reporting the facts. These are the aspects of the story that matter. This. These are the things that are going into it. You saw it also with the Monitor with their coverage of education freedom accounts, things of that nature. They did show both sides, in my opinion, when it came to at least into some of the reporting on it. But it very much is entirely going, well, this program's costing this much, this number of families are showing satisfaction, blah, 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 these are the stats and things like that. No, it's entirely a story specific to this one family. It's anecdotes. It's anecdotes instead of data and information that people can actually take away from something useful, in my opinion. It makes it really hard to figure out what's going on in the world, where instead of knowing these are the facts of the case. It's like this guy felt good about this thing. Like, okay, neato. I don't know how that helps me make a decision for how I want to vote in the next election. Things of that
Right.
nature.
Yeah. The education freedom account thing, I mean, my children are in public schools and were in public schools. I would not have homeschooled them. It was very difficult during the coronavirus pandemic to have them, to have two parents who work from home have children also on Zoom classes. That was not for me. And even if I could have afforded to send my kids to Dairyfield or something like a lot of rich liberals who like to lecture us about school spending did, I wouldn't have done that. I wanted my children to be, and I had them late in life. I wanted them to be in the school system that I grew up in, and for the most part, I was, I moved around a lot because of my dad was in the Air Force. So, but my main, my family's been here 120 years in Concord, and I wanted them here, and I wanted them in a public school. I wanted them to see all kinds and meet all kinds of different people. I didn't want them to just be around Catholics or rich people or Christians or whoever or homeschooled. God, no. But the thing that bothers me about the EFA argument is the whole we're defunding the school. It's 30, even if it's 60 or $100 million, the schools cost $3.7 billion a year. It's a fraction of 1% of the amount of money that's going into the EFA program. And it will never be, even if every child who's homeschooled or sent to a private school and is within those upper income brackets, if it actually, or zero income brackets, if it actually gets to that, it still hasn't gotten to that. It's 350% of federal poverty, which what is $120,000 a year. I mean, $120,000 a year is not very rich these days. Not when you're spending $2,500 for an apartment if you don't own a house. And certainly the only thing available on the market that isn't a dump is 700 grand. So you're going to barely be able to make that mortgage payment at $120,000 household income. But that whole, and oh, by the way, we increased education spending year over year, twice or three times as much as went into the EFA program, meaning we're not starving schools. Schools are spending way more money than they probably should be. And because of obligations they've made, due to step and track raises and teacher contracts, which are 90%, nurses and teachers and custodian personnel are 85 to 95% of every school budget. And we want to pay teachers well. Teachers in Concord, New Hampshire are some of the most expensive teachers in the state. They have the best contract. They're tweaking healthcare to get to a semblance of order, if you will, because it goes up 12 to 13% every year. And whether you're a good teacher or a bad teacher, you make 3 to 5% more every year. And oh, by the way, if you go from a bachelor's to a master's or master's or higher, you get another step up, whether you're good or not. If you're a lousy journalist, you're not a journalist for very long. That doesn't mean we do that with civil servants or with teachers. Certainly the most important people that we have in government structure, maybe second to EMTs and police officers. And maybe they're all tied. They're all equal. We want the best teachers and the best EMTs to save us when we're dying and the fastest cops in a cruiser to get to shooting, period. Right? Those are the most important jobs in society. We're not going to cheap on those jobs. But you can be a lousy one of them and you will not be long if you're not in a government sector. And the results are showing that, even though they are improving since the coronavirus pandemic, our results are just not really very good. There's a lot of kids who are graduating who don't know basic math and don't know basic English, and that's unacceptable for a $3.7 billion system.
Tony, anything else on this you want to touch on before we wrap it up?
No, well, let me add one other. Let me defend the Concord Monitor for a moment, and no, gasp. And in journalism in general. This is not an easy job, and it's not an easy job today. That story could have been improved by being more accurate and thorough about this person who was a dangerous person. And again, the more recent things that you can find on Patch about him, and that will be until May 1st. Well, I will remove all of them by that time. He was he was involved in a lot of different crime, alleged. Most of them, or they went away. You know, they were minor things that went away, but they weren't always minor things. There are several assaults in there and other things that he was arrested for. And so it's not easy to find that. It really isn't easy to find balance in what you're trying to do. It's work. That's why we call it work. And it isn't just about saying, this is a bad news outlet or this is a bad reporter or writer. We need to do as much as possible to tell the whole story, and as much as we can. And no one in their right mind will say about this person that journalist and or their bosses did a thorough job to leave it at one sentence. And because there are plenty of sex offenders, and I know them, who don't get into trouble, who don't get rearrested, who are living in apartment buildings in our city and have no problem at all. In fact, I know at least probably about like 10 of them if I had an extra day. And I could share you this person's I know, and I can say that because a couple of them have gotten arrested, and I've taken down their reports because they were like, "Yep, I had too many beers that night and I threw something across the room and it was stupid. I've been really good. I haven't done anything in 8 years. I go to my clinician." I mean, like there are people who do heinous crimes like that, child sexual assault and other things, who serve their time and get out and work really hard to not cause problems. I don't write flowery stories about those people. I only write about them when they get into trouble. So you got to be both ways. Yep, everybody looked at Mr. Moody and looked up to him, but he was arrested dozens of times after that, and it deserved more than a sentence. And it's a difficult job. It's difficult to do this job. It always has been. It's even more difficult today. And all anybody could ask is say, if you're going to do a flowery piece about the child rapist who died, who many people relied on, give more than a sentence to what they actually did. Go and look up the report. How many years did they serve in prison? How many other times did they get arrested for failing to report? That is a key thing. There are a lot of sex offenders in our community. There are like 200 or something in our community. The last time I did one of the maps, which was several years ago, that we used to do the Halloween maps. There are hundreds of them in Concord. There are only maybe a dozen arrests for duty report every year. That means lots of them do what they're supposed to do and stay out of trouble. Meaning I don't want to sound like I'm defending registered sex offenders, but let's be honest, some of them are really working hard to get through life after doing something really heinous. And that means that when somebody doesn't act that way, you have to really tell people. You have to say more than one line. You got to say, yep, lots of people liked him in the homeless community. Here's probably why he was homeless. You can get that information from the clerk's office. It's one email. How many times was Roddy Moody arrested over the last whatever? They'll give you all the charges. There are people in our community arrested dozens and dozens of times who never go to jail. And then maybe someone will say, oh, it's disorderly conduct. Oh, they nicked a candy bar. Oh, they pushed somebody. At some point after maybe 12 arrests, 24, 48, 60, the person should be in a box for a little bit of time, right? In this case, anybody could have gone, it's a one email to the clerk's office to get a background check on everybody, on anybody. That could have been done. One of the problems about his lack of homelessness was he was arrested X times for and some of them were major felonies, and I consider duty to report a major felony. You're out of jail now. You've served your child sexual assault charges. You've done your time in jail. Now you have a responsibility to check in with the police every 3 months. Simple as that. So, as much as we want to be critical about this, and we should be critical about how this story was framed, it was fixable, and yep, it was fixable. And I don't know this journalist very well. I don't think I've met her. I've met Catherine McLaughlin, who's the city beat person. I run into her every once in a while. So, but it's a difficult job and it's hard. And we have to be, the other part of us is that as pontificators too, we have to be careful about how critical we are of people who are doing the best work they think they can do. I really hope that the journalist listens to what we've said and looks at it, and looks at it differently. I can tell you, HA, too, like I said at the beginning of this part, I don't do all the same things all the time. It is very difficult to write about a person's death. And when you find out about it, or it's something tragic, and then you look up information about them to find out who they are, and there's a whole litany of really not nice things. It's not easy to do that. And I don't, it isn't you don't necessarily have to do it. This deserved balance. This deserved more than one sentence, because this person was dangerous and did a heinous thing. He's not a hero. Lord help him wherever he is. And he had a lot of friends, and that's all really, really good. But he did not do very good things. And even after the really bad things he did more bad things. And those are the facts.
Facts are very important. Tony, thanks so much for joining me. Be sure to check out Concord NH Patch on Facebook, as well as patch.com. Put in your zip code up there at the top and find your local patch, even if you're not in Concord. But you should definitely follow Concord anyways. It's the city capital. Some important things are going on there. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks for the New England take, for having me again, AJ. Great to see you.
Welcome anytime. It's great talking to you too. NewEnglandTake.com. Please be sure to like and subscribe. Be sure to check us out on YouTube and all major podcast platforms. We'll talk to you soon.